Hello, everyone. Welcome to our discussion. This discussion has quite a complicated title, to my mind. The first part of the sentence is quite understandable, and it sounds like, who would you prefer to have as your neighbor? The second one, a correctional service with focus on inclusion and normalization, is a bit more complicated one, but we will make it understandable to you during this discussion. Those of you who need translation from English to Latvian, please raise your hand, and then you will get equipment for translation. My name is Agnes Cimdiņa. I'm advisor at the Norwegian Embassy in Riga, and I'm also a social anthropologist. I will moderate this session. We have 4 brilliant speakers here. We have Dmitrijs Kaļins, head of Latvian Prison Administration and former head of Olaine Prison. We have Dana Valija-Anskaite, head of Nova Vita Rehabilitation Center in Latvia. We have Kim Ekhaugen, director of International Unit at the Directorate of Norwegian Correctional Service. And we have Stian Estenstad, who is from Oslo Red Cross, head of prison support and network after imprisonment. To put it in simpler terms, we will discuss how to turn a criminal and complicated past into meaningful futures. The discussion will last for 1 hour, and during the last 15 minutes, you will also have a possibility to ask questions using Catchbox microphone. Before we start our discussion, I would like to show a video to make a better understanding for you what we will talk about. So please, can I ask for the video?
Savu pirmo laupīšanu paveicu 6 gadu vecumā. Kopā ar 2 draugiem ielauzāmies Koksnes preču veikalā. Nozagām dažas pastmarkas. Man vienmēr pavadījis nemieris un tieksme pēc asām izjūtām. Mana mamma bija stingra. Neatceros, ka viņa būtu mani apskāvusi vai paņēmusi klēpī. Tā vietā bērnība man saistās ar bļaušanu un sišanu. Es biju hiperaktīvs bērns, ar mani nebija viegli. Mammai bija 16 gadi, kad piedzimu. Viņa droši vien bija par jaunu mātes lomai un netika ar šo situāciju galā pārāk labi. Tagad esmu pieņēmis, ka viņa centās kā vien mācēja. Mājās jutos kā ieslodzījumā, taču man bija arī 2 patvērumu vietas – pie vecmammas un pie tantes. Sveins Īvars bija mans brālēns. Bijām viena vecuma un skolā gājām vienā klasē. Viņš bija mans dvēseles radinieks. 5. klasē Sveins nomira no meningīta. Tas manī kaut ko mainīja. Jutos pilnīgi viens. Neviens ar mani nerunāja par to, kas bija noticis. Mani pārņēma trauksme, milzīgas bailes, ka zaudēšu vēl kādu tuvu cilvēku. Gada vasarā es kopā ar 2 draugiem aizmuku uz Oslo. Tur pirmo reizi pamēģināju hašišu. 18 gadu vecumā to jau pīpēju katru dienu, gan dienu, gan nakti. Tas man deva pašapziņu un izteiktu labsajūtu. 2005. gada ziemā es pamodos Ullersmo cietuma kamerā. Svēru 74 kg, man bija pārņēmusi paranoja un bija pazaudējis savas saknes. Narkotikas un noziedzība mani bija pārvērtušas par cinisku nelietu. Es vairs nebiju es pats. Zināju, ka man jāmainās, ja gribu izdzīvot. Kādu dienu savā kamerā runāja ar vienu ieslodzīto. Viņš man izstāstīja par Stianu un Sarkanā krusta pēcieslodzījuma atbalsta tīklu, un ka Stians plāno doties burāt. Aizsūtīju Stianam zīmīti, un pēc dažām dienām viņš ieradās pie manis. Kopš tā brīža Stians mani vienmēr pieskatīja. Viņš nekad nezaudēja ticību manī. Viņš nekad nelika man justies vainīgam. Tobrīd man sociālā kompetence bija 14-gadnieka līmenī, arī emocionāli bija ļoti nenobriedis. Man bija vajadzīgs laiks, lai sevi atkal iepazītu un atgūtu spēju pats sev uzticēties. Stians ļāva man būt tādam, kāds esmu, ļāva man atrast savu ceļu. Viņš ir kļuvis par vienu no manis visrespektētākajiem cilvēkiem. 2006. gada vasarā es pievienojos pēcieslodzījuma atbalsta tīkla rīkotajam burāšanas braucienam. Pirmo reizi dzīvē izbaudīju veselu nedēļu pilnīga miera. Man nesatrauc nekas un neviens. Svarīgs bija tikai konkrētais mirklis. Tā man bija pilnīgi jauna pieredze. Man uzņēma ar cieņu un kā vienlīdzīgu ar pārējiem. Tas man iedrošināja sākt runāt ar normāliem cilvēkiem par normālām lietām. Pirmo reizi es iedomājos, ka varētu iekļauties sabiedrībā. Ilgi gribēju nonākt atpakaļ brīvībā, taču nezināju kā. Bet burājot, es sāku ticēt, ka tas ir iespējams, ka šāda dzīve ir iespējama. Šodien man ir tāda dzīve, par kādu es neuzdrošinājos sapņot pat vistrakākajos sapņos.
I think this short video, only 4 minutes, tells a good story about how to help people to return to normal life after imprisonment, and this will be our main topic. The main hero of the video, who helped the guy, Johnny, to return to society from imprisonment, is here. Stian is here. And we will have a chance to ask him many questions, but I'd like to start with Kim, asking you, is a question, whom do you want as your neighbor? Is it a good starting point for a discussion about correctional services?
Yes, it is. Before I answer the question, I would like to say thank you very much for the invitation. It's a beautiful place, never been here before. It's so nice. Yes, it's the right question to ask. Because I worked in the correctional service, I worked in since 1985. And I started as a regular officer, like you did. And I was not open-minded. I was thinking that, why don't we just lock them in? Why do we have to give them support? And I couldn't understand why they were coming back all the time. 60% at that time came back to the prison service in Norway. And little by little, I started to reflect. And I saw that if we do something while they are in prison, they will be a better neighbor when they are released. Because one day, all the prisoners in Latvia, all the prisoners in Norway will be released one day. And then they will be your neighbor. And what kind of neighbor do you want? Do you want a neighbor that have been locked in 23 hours a day, 1 hour fresh air, water, bread, nothing more? Or do you want a prisoner that have actually participating in education, workshops, programs, whatever, so we can become a better neighbor or better person after release than he was before he entered the prison? So I changed little by little, and we use this saying every day in Norway: who do you want as a neighbor? And I also want to ask the audience a question. Let's pretend that all of you are mothers or fathers, and you have a son, like Johnny, and he do something wrong, 1 time, 2 times, and he ends up in prison. And I am the prison officer taking care of your son. If I ask you, how do you want me to treat your son? You all will say, with dignity and respect. Because you want your son back, healthy, and participating in society. Be a taxpayer, be a good neighbor. So, I think it's very important to have focus on your next neighbor. And there's many ways to do it. It's very demanding, because it's probably the most difficult job in the world, to change people's behavior. First, you have to be motivated, but to be motivated, you need positive environment around you. And to be motivated, you need motivated staff. You need trained staff to motivate inmates. You cannot force anyone to be motivated for change. But that's our job, to motivate the inmates in prison. But if you just lock them in, no activities, 1 hour fresh air, I will guarantee you they will not be the best neighbor. I will stop there.
Mm-hmm. So what is normalization in the context of imprisonment? What is considered normal in prison? Dmitri, do you have an answer for that?
Jā, paldies, es atbildēšu latviski.
We'll be answering in Latvian.
Normalizācija ir tas, ka pats ieslodzījums, mums jau tā pati būtība ir brīvības atņemšana, kustības brīvība, jebkādas cits brīvības, bet pati atrašanās cietumā nedrīkst būt kā papildus sots ar sliktiem sadzīves apstākļiem vai sliktu attieksmi. Tādā ziņā, jā, mēs pret viņiem jāizturās kā normāliem cilvēkiem, normāliem sabiedrības locekļiem, kuri atrodas ieslodzījumā, un viņiem ir viens un vienīgais sods. Tā ir brīvības atņemšana, nevis kaut kāda vēl papildus sodi.
But does your perception of normality corresponds to their perception of normality? What do you consider as normal as a prison officer or head of the prison or a law-abiding citizen? Does your perception correspond to their perception of normality?
Iespējams, ka tas neatbilst līdz galam mūsu uztvere, mana uztvere vai manu darbinieku uztvere pret viņu uztvere, tāpēc varbūt cilvēki arī nokļūst ieslodzījumā, bet pats galvenais ir izmantot to ieslodzījuma laiku tieši, lai arī parādītu, kā sabiedrība viņus arī vēlās runāt un redzēt, un ka sabiedrība ir gatava viņus uztvert, ja viņu izturēsies atbildīgi un cieņpilni pret to pašu arī sabiedrību.
Others, do you have comment in this regard, Sten? Maybe you?
Ask the question again?
Yes, normally you have also worked as a prison officer earlier. So what is considered as normal by a prisoner and what is considered as normal by prison officer? Is this one and the same thing?
Life in prison is far away from normal, and the prison officers know that for sure. But still, when I was working as a prison officer and afterwards when I started this program in behalf of the Red Cross, I was shocked about the situation with met them when they come back to normal society, because the punishments for most of the guys I was working with, the girls also, started there when you were released from prison, because the life outside prison is actually the problem here. So if you are going to stop this bad circle, because a lot of these guys, as Kim told you, they come back to prison. And why aren't we willing to invest more money in these people when they cost society so much money? We have an economic research company a few years ago who number how much each person costs society. Actually, the numbers are more greater, but they say at least 1 million Norwegian crown, 100,000 euro each year, when they were doing crime. And in prison, it's almost the same price. So at the same time, I calculate how much does the program, which we were helping them with, cost. I think it was almost 7 euro or something each day for each person. So why don't actually the government put more money in these projects and prepare the inmates better for the way after release? Yeah, so it's very important. I think the officers in the prison understand the situation and the role, but I think it's hard for a prison officer as well even to see it, because you have to be very closely and following them after release to see that happening. It's very struggling for Johnny and a lot of other peoples.
So I think the general perception, well, I can also refer to myself, let's say when I think of prisoner, I assume that their biggest wish is to get released from prison. But at the same time, there is a lot of research saying that release from prison is always, well, it can often be very, very complicated, very scary, very tough experience, and which actually I, as a citizen, do not understand. And I have actually gathered some quotes from a research which was done for Red Cross about experiences and feelings that prisoners have just before they're about to be released. And what they do complain mostly about, or what they are scared about, is about these different worlds and about the normal life, which they do not have any experience with because they have spent so many years locked inside prison. And they're afraid of loneliness, then drugs become their greatest friend. And especially the two next quotations, which I can read aloud, express their fear that they are not able to master social life outside prison walls. And one of them is saying, I panicked when I was about to be released. What on earth I was to do? How can I get back some of the things I had? You have a lowest self-esteem, and you have lost a lot of things during the years when you were into getting high. My problem when I was released was that I did not know what I was going to do with my time. And then the other prisoner is telling, it's easy to seek back to familiar environments where you have respect, even if your intention is to not to do anything wrong. For me, it's complicated to go to a cafe and talk about politics. I do not know anything about it. I have no bearing of how to make money, so I instead sell tons of amphetamine. So what everyone is pointing to, at least in this research report, is that actually they somehow have felt much safer in prison than later in society. So my next question to you would be, how would you comment the statement, safe in prison, unsafe in society? Do you agree with that, or you can argument against that statement? Is it a provocative statement? Any volunteers? Yes?
Es visdrīzāk laikam piekritīšu, jo cietumā daļa no viņām tiešām jūtās drošāk, jo tur ir dienas kārtība, tur viss ir uzrakstīts priekšā, kurā laikā tu cēlies, cikos tev brokas, pusdienas, pasteigas, visādi sociālie darbinieki, resocializācijas pasākumi, nodarbinātības skola un tā tālāk. Tur administrācija uzņemās to lomu, lemēju lomu, mēs izdomājam priekšā un pasakam, kas tev ir jādara. Izejot brīvībā, viens jau ir šoks, ka tev pašam jātiek galā ar savu dzīvi, otrs arī šoks, man neviens nepasaka priekšā, ko man tagad darīt. Man it kā vairs nav jādara tas, kas bija cietumā pēc dienas kārtības, bet nenormāli liels jautājums, bet ko man darīt ar savu dzīvi? Man pašam personīgi bija darba pieredzē gadījums, kad mēs tiešām ļoti rūpīgi gatavojam vienu ieslodzīto atbrīvošanai. Viņam kopējais termiņš bija kaut kas pāri 10 gadiem, un darbinieki strādājot ar viņu novēroja, ka jo tuvāk atbrīvošanas laiks, jo nedrošāks viņš jūtās, viņš ir nervos, viņš ir satraucies, tad ar viņu runājot ilgas stundas izdabojam ārā to, par ko viņš baidās. Mums tas viss var likties smieklīgi, bet viņš reāli baidījās. Viņš saka, es nezinu, kā aizbraukt mājās, jo pa to ieslodzījumu laiku ir mainījusies valūta Latvijā. Viņš iesēdās tad, kad bija lati, tagad ir eiro. Viņš prasīja, vai stāvvieta, autoosta vai pieturu ir turpat. Viņš pat nezina, kurā virzienā iet, kā nopirkt biļeti, vai joprojām var pirkt kasē, vai kaut kas ir mainījies. Viņam nav ziņu par to ārpasauli, kas mums ir ikdiena un mums ir saprotami, liekas pats par sevi saprotams. Viņam tas ir tas, kas aizņem to prātu un liek visu laiku satraukties un domāt tā neziņa. Ko mēs izdarījām? Mēs organizējam darbinieku pavadībā iziešanu ārā. Pirmā reizē mēs aizgājām līdz pieturai, lai parādītu, ka jā, ir turpat. Pēc tam mēs aizgājām vēl tālāk, mēs parādījām līdz kasei, fiziski nepirkām biļeti, bet kā viss tas notiek, iedevām tos procesus, noņemām tās visas bailes, kas ir no tādām pamatdarbībām. Un reāli kaut kur pēc trešās izējas viņš jau kļuva mierīgāks un teica, jā, ok, pirmā laika es esmu gatavs un es sapratu, ka visu var atrisināt un ir izcinājumi.
So, do I understand you right that what you are saying is that actually we should focus on inclusion of prisoners in society already while they're in prison? And before we return to that question, maybe Valia, you can reflect on your experiences. I can ask you in Latvian. Es saprotu, ka jūs esat saskārusies ar cilvēkiem, kas ir izcietuši sodu un pēc tam nespēja pilnvērtīgi turpināt savu dzīvi, un jūs rehabilitācijas centrā viņiem palīdziet tikt galā ar tādām situācijām. Vai jūs varētu pastāstīt, kuras ir tās būtiskākās problēmas, ar kurām šie cilvēki saskars, un kas ir tās visizteiktākās bailes viņu ikdienā?
Tātad mūsu rehabilitācijas centrā nonāk cilvēki, kuriem neizdodas dzīve arī, teiksim, pēc cietuma. Un to var ļoti labi saprast, kā tu stāstīji. Viņš aizbrauca līdz mājai, viņš autoostā nopirka biļeti, bet pēc tam viņam nākas meklēt, kur viņš dzīvos, kur viņš ies strādāt. Un tad viņš saskarās ar mums cilvēkiem, līdzcilvēkiem, ar savu nākamo darba devēju, ar savu kaimiņu. Un mēs droši vien ļoti bieži viņus tā pēc iespējas nogrūst, vai arī vēl kaut ko pateikt. Jo ļoti daudz man ir stāstījuši, piemēram, ir cietuma pieredze, un par viņu runā, kā tad tev gāja tālāk, tur, nezinu, knapi gads pagāja, es sapratu, ka man nav ko šeit darīt, es labāk iešu atpakaļ cietumā, es speciāli iešu izdarīšu kaut ko, un nonākšu atpakaļ, jo tur viņš ir drošībā. Starp mums cilvēkiem viņam tā kā nesenāk. Es domāju, lielā mērā mēs nepieņemam. Man ļoti gribētos, ka viss tas, ko mēs te runājam, nonāk līdz sabiedrībai, un ka mēs padomātu, ka tie ir cilvēki, kuriem dzīvē nav paveicies droši vien, kuriem dzīve ir bijusi tāda, kāda bijusi, un viņi nonākuši tur, kur nonākuši. Mēs taču gribētu, ka viņi atgrieztos dzīvē, un ka viņi būtu atkal cilvēki. Un mums vajadzētu viņiem palīdzēt, jo tā ir arī mūsu sabiedrības drošība. Mums ir drošāk, ja viņi vai nu atgriežās dzīvē, vai nu tiešām tad ir ieslodzījumā, vai kaut kur drošībā, vai arī viņi tiešām mainās. Bet mainīties un resocializēties, kā mums patīk teikt, tas ir ļoti garš un ļoti, ļoti sarežģīts process un ļoti atkarīgs no mums visiem. Es tā domāju.
Thank you. Before we proceed with further questions to also Stian and Kim, I'd like to ask a question for all of you. Could we have the first Slido question on screen, please? So please open Slido, go into Slido. You will see now it on the screen. Can you see it? Yes. Slido.com and you have to write Uzipsni, as it says on screen, also for those who do not read Latvian, Uzipsni. And then you have to answer either yes or no. Would you employ a person who is recently released from prison?
Okay, we can finish.
Let's wait for more answers before we proceed. Now we have approximately 70 says yes, they would employ a person who is recently released from prison. 29% says no. Now it's 80%. It's still changing. Let's wait for one more minute. Okay, while we're waiting for this final results, maybe Stian, you can comment how it's in, you experience these issues every day in your work. How would you comment the situation from your perspective? How welcome are these people when they return to society?
I understand the skepticism among the society, but still it is so important that we try to understand the situation. Actually, we have a working program, and it's so important. As Dimitri said, it's those guys and girls, they go from be locked in to be locked out of the society. This is quite new for them, so that there is somebody trying to give them trust and opportunities is so important. But it is still important that they have some trainings arenas where they can train to be a good citizen, a good employee. So we actually have some training program where they can actually train for being ready for an employee situation in the bigger companies. And we also work closely together with the big companies. So when they are finished with the program, with the work program, they could go actually to these businesses. And it's quite good results actually. And a lot of them have good skills. And they are not used to getting opportunities. So, but it's still very important to see that we have to have a holistic mindset if we are going to help inmates and released persons, because there is a lot of needs which we have to solve at the same time. So it's very important that there is cooperation through the public sector, because there is a very hard, because there is a lot of responsibility in different offices, in the government, in the municipality, among the businesses and everything. So it's a lot of, and it's very complicated, even for us. So how can you think it is for them when they get released from prison, from these routines in the prison, out to society, when nobody wake them up, nobody following them to the work, nobody put them behind the desk and teach them. So it's, and also we have to remember that there is a crime network outside the prison which try to get in contact and touch with them. So it's very hard to say no to old friends. So it's very important as well that the NGOs take a part of this and try to help them. They need somebody to build trust with at the last part of the sentence, which are getting the opportunity to visit them in prison and start building a good relation, which is very important if we are going to follow them up afterwards. And that helps. It's very good results, actually.
Kim, you had a comment, and at the same time I have a question for you. How do you work then in prisons during this, let's say, last year of sentence? How do you include them in society while they are in imprisonment?
Yeah, I will try to answer your question. First, it's important for me to say that it sounds now that all prisoners are motivated for help. But in fact, I used to divide the inmates in Norway. I think it's in Latvia, but I think it also is in different countries. We are not that, we are almost the same. It's a prison system. But you have three groups of prisoners, I will say. The first group is a small group. They go to prison for something they did. They are doing programs, they're doing workshop, or not. But they are released and you never see them again. They don't need any help in a way. You don't see them again. Then you have the other group on the other side, which is getting bigger and bigger in Norway. We call it the group that doing organized crime. That's their job, to do organized crime. They're professionals. They don't need Red Cross. They don't need social workers, because they know that they will continue where they are released. But we have a big group in the middle that have gone in and out of prison 10, 15, 20 times. As you said, long history before they go to prison, and then they stay in prison, and people think that now we should save the world and save these people with the long history they have from before. And then they go out to nothing. That's why we need to talk more about after release. In Norway, we try to focus on the principle of normalization. That means we try to create an atmosphere in a prison that is very much like a normal situation outside. Because our job is not to punish more. The punishment is the loss of freedom. Other than that, we have to try to make it as outside. So let's say we have a person, he has 6 years sentence in Norway. After 1/3 of the sentence, he can apply for release, leaves with or without escorts. And if you do that one time, 3 hours, then he will have 5 hours, then he will have 1 day, then he will have 3 days at the most. Actually, it's 5 days at the most. If everything goes good, he doesn't do anything wrong, he come back, he take a drug test, everything is fine, then he can also apply for lower security. So it's a kind of progression through the sentence, red line through the sentence. If he behave, he will probably be released after 4 years in Norway, 2/3. But before that, the Red Cross, the last half a year, the Red Cross will come into the prison, the probation service will come into the prison, and other NGOs will come into the prison. Our job as a correctional service is to open the doors for NGOs so they can work with the clients. without the NGOs in Norway, 30, 40 of them in total, without them, we will never ever have these good results in Norway. So we try to have the progression. We have to be a good host for the NGOs and make sure that you have good working conditions when you're working with the clients. So that's, I think that was the answer for your question.
But is it so then that effective correctional service is dependent on well, society at large, on volunteers and NGOs?
Yeah, because as I said, there is a history before he come to prison. That could be 25 years. And then he served a sentence for 2 years, and society thinks that we should rehabilitate that person with these 20 years of history before. It's very difficult. And then he go back to the same environment, as many of the prisoners are saying. That's the most difficult part. First, you have to get rid of all friends. It's actually his friends. You have to get rid of the old friends and have new ones. Never been sober for many years, using drugs all the time, and try to say, hello, my name is Johnny, I'm 25 years old, can you be my friend? It's very difficult. So that's why we have volunteers and NGOs.
Okay, before we proceed with volunteers, I have a question to you again. Please, can we have Slido question number 2 on the screen? The second question goes like, would you volunteer to help a convict to return to society after serving his or her sentence? So would you volunteer to help a prisoner or convict to return to society after his or her finished her sentence? So we see so far that majority is answering yes, actually 75%, and that is a very good sign. And while others are answering, well, now it's 69% yes, 31 no, and approximately 30%. Stian, could you tell us more about why actually volunteers are motivated helping prisoners, and what are the biggest challenges in this work? And what do they expect from you when they approach help?
I think most people wonder what's happening behind these prison walls. And actually, I think it's a part of my job is to tell people what's happening in the prison, what people are sitting in the prison, because it's a lot of opinion about who the person in prison is and what's the reasonable punishment. But a very few have a lot of knowledge about what's happened in the prison and what the people are in the prison and what's happened when they're released. So it's very important. And I think when people know those things, I think it's much more easy to get them to get volunteers. In Norway now, it's not a problem for us to get volunteers. And it's also important for me that we have volunteers with different sex, age, and background, because the people population is very different. So there's not one kind of group. There's a lot of nice and decent and beautiful persons who have taken some wrong steps in life or having a hard backgrounds, as Johnny, which is one of the guys which I respect most, because he have a struggle, and it's not easy to understand the way he have been gone to come this far with 2 kids and living with a work and everything and wife. So that's, I think people which follow this process very closely, it gives you something. I think it's so easy like that, yeah.
But in average, how long time does it take? I mean, how long time this follow-up is needed for, if it's possible to say in average, what?
I think first when I started, I think a year, I think it have to be enough. But it's so different from person to person, and it's also so different what they need. So I think it's important that we have different offerings in our offerings as an NGO, and we have different persons, and I think it's important that everybody have to choose his own way. And if it takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it's not the important thing. We are there all the way if you want us. That's the most important thing. So it's quite hard to say how long it takes. It's very different from person to person. And they keep saying, somebody don't need us at all.
And volunteers.
And somebody don't earn to get or help. And that's why these projects also have to have a professional staff like me behind, which can pick out the right persons and think about the safety for the volunteers. It's important that we have frames where the volunteers is working in, and we also treat the participant, as we call them, differently because there is different need and different challenges. That's important.
Dana, jūs varbūt varētu raksturot, kā šī situācija, kā ir Latvijā, vismaz balstoties jūsu pieredzē, cik viegli ir iesaistīt brīvprātīgos, vai arī jūsu rehabilitācijas centrā strādā brīvprātīgie, un kā veidojās kontakts sabiedrībai ar šiem cilvēkiem, kas ir izcietuši sodu un ir brīvībā?
Mēs strādājam 11 gadus. Pirmos 5 praktiski mēs visi bijām brīvprātīgie. Daudz mūsu nebija, bet gribu arī teikt, ka ļoti daudz nāk par brīvprātīgiem cilvēki, kuriem pašiem kaut kas nav sanācis. Un viņi tā kā grib kaut ko aizpildīt, manuprāt, savā dzīvē, un līdz ar to viņi, es teiktu, pat nedrīkst strādāt ar šiem cilvēkiem. Viņiem labāk būtu nenākt. Un tā arī bijis, ka es saku, ka paldies, nevajag. Tā kā vispār es uzskatu, ka tam nebūtu jābūt brīvprātīgam darbam, bet iznāk jocīgi, tāpēc, ka tas arī īsti nav naudas darbs. Tas vienalga, tam jābūt sirds darbam. Grūti pateikt, kā tur iznāk beigās, bet vēl par tiem pašiem cilvēkiem runājot, bijušiem ieslodzītiem, viņi jau tāpat kā mēs ir ļoti dažādi. Un man uzreiz nāk prātā konkrēti cilvēki, piemēram. Atceros, ļoti daudz cietumā iemācās skaisti gleznot, dziedāt, zīmēt, bet citu prasmju viņiem tomēr nav. Un tad, kad viņi atnāk arī pie mums, pēc tam rehabilitācijas centrā, viņiem šī cietuma pieredze un cietuma tā dzīve ir tik ļoti asinīs, ka viņi uzreiz grib arī pie mums sakārtot visu pēc tās cietuma dzīves parauga. Tā kā ievest savu kārtību. Mēs ar to parasti uzreiz arī sākam runāt, ka šeit nav un ka te tā nedarīsim un ka dzīvojam tā, kā jādzīvo cilvēkiem sabiedrībā. Bet tas ir ļoti, ļoti garš process. To nevar iemācīt. Un es arī saprotu, cietumā ļoti daudz ar viņiem strādā, ļoti daudz dod. Bet kamēr viņi vēl ir cietumā, viņiem grūti paņemt līdzi šo te, tiešām pieredzi vai praksi. Tā ir jāiegūst jau dzīvē. Brīvajā dzīvē jau sākot strādāt un viss. Un tad tas ieskriešanās laiks ir ļoti grūts, jo vismaz visus, ko es esmu redzējuši cilvēkus, ir ļoti viņiem grūti. Viņš neprot sarunāties, neprot attiecības veidot, neprot arī faktiski varbūt strādāt, neprot tā pa īstam no sirds. Dažreiz, protams, ir atsevišķi cilvēki, kuriem tā kā izdodās. Mēs savā centrā esam tā, ja gadu saskaitam, tad iznāk apmēram 10% cilvēku no tiem, kas ir bijuši centrā. Tā kā maina savu domāšanu, es teikšu. Bet vēl jau liela problēma, ka visi, manuprāt, tie, kas bijuši ieslodzījumā, viņiem lielākā daļa viņi ir atkarīgi cilvēki. Un tikko viņš atkal iedzer vai ielieto, tad viņš atkal izdara to pašu, teiksim, ko viņš ir darījis. Līdz ar to praktiski man liekas, ka viņiem jādzīvo ir skaidrā, jo viņi nevar tad par sevi atbildēt. Tad pazūd viss, ko viņiem mācīja. Līdz ar to tur ir visas problēmas kopā, bet atkarība ir ļoti, ļoti svarīga problēma. Ar to ir jāstrādā.
Yes, and Dmitrijs, you have something to comment in this regard?
Es gribētu piebiedroties un kāpēc es uzskatu, ka jābūt lielākam sabiedrības un brīvprātīga, bet sabiedrības iesaistē, jo es negribu nevienu aizvainot, bet es strādājot cietumos redzu, ka īstenībā tas ieslodzījums, tas jau ir tas gala mērķis un gala rezultāts daudzām sīkām kļūdām. Mēs to redzējām video ar Džoniju, tur ļoti labi stāsts, un viņš ir ļoti izplatīts starp mūsu klientiem, ka māte bija ļoti prasīga un smaga bērnība, tad viņam nomira draugs, neviens ar viņu neparunāja. Un tās sabiedrības pieļautās kļūdiņas vienu uz otru reizinās, un tad rezultāts ir ieslodzījums. Un līdz ar to ieslodzījuma vieta nevar būt vienīgā veida, kas nevienīgā vieta un ieslodzījuma vieta darbinieki, kas izlabo visas tās kļūdas. Mēs ļoti daudz izdaram, bet vajadzīga tās pašas sabiedrības līdzdalība, lai turpinātu to pozitīvo efektus. Pretējā gadījumā, jā, viņš atdurās pret kaut kādu nesaprašanos, neiejūtību, un tad viss vecajās sliedēs. Kāpēc viņi grib ieviest to cietuma dzīvi un visu? Jo iespējams viņiem dzīvē tā ir vienīgā reize, kad viss bija salikts pa plauktiņiem un sakārtots, un viņi nevis aiz ļaunuma mēģina to atražot, bet aiz tā, ka tā ir vienīgā drošā un viņiem saprotam un zinām dzīves modelis un ikdienas modelis. Un tāpēc viņi cenšos to atgriežot.
Yeah, could we please have a Slido question number 3? Should we do more to include former prisoners in our society? Answer yes or no. So far 100% yes. And while we wait for other answers, I assume there could be other answers as well. What is missing in institutional support? Actually, this is a question to all of you, because you have all been in touch with the prison system and with resocialization issues. Maybe we can start with you, Kim.
It's a tricky question, actually, to answer, because it's all about money. Budgets, so we can actually have the right numbers of staff. And it's very difficult when you have a lot of challenges in the society, when you have politicians that have to prioritize. When you have elderly people, you have lack of education, or you have health issues, whatever, and think that the politicians will use the money on prisons. I haven't seen that many times. So that's a challenge itself. But I really believe that enough staff, well-trained staff in the prison is very important, because they understand the concept after the right training, of course, and can find good ways to work with all the NGOs. And I know that from many countries that it's a lack of staff, and inmates are living in dormitories, big dormitories, and the subculture is very strong. It's so little staff in the prisons, so actually it's the prisoners that are running the prisons if the dormitories are too big and it's the lack of staff. So it's also different ways to organize it differently, but then we need, or the prison service need, in Norway and other countries, need more higher budgets.
Can we have, please, the next Slido question? Slido question number 4. Resocialization of former prisoners. Whose responsibility is it? Can you please answer with 1, 2, 3 keywords, and we will see your answer cloud on the screen. So, whose responsibility is it, resocialization of former prisoners? And this is a question which I want to continue discussing with you. Stian, what do you think?
As Kim said, I think the government and the municipality and the politicians have a big responsibility, because they have to do something about the prisons and the system. And also they have to do something about the public sector, because there is quite big walls between different parts of public sector. And that's one of the biggest challenges, actually, when we are starting helping them after release, because the public sector has a big responsibility for a lot of things, and there is a lot of things which has to be taken care of, and everything has to speak together. And we have a little time when the people are released from prison before things goes bad. So it's very important that every effort, also the NGOs, work very closely. And it's also important that the governments invest money in the NGOs, because this can't be done without funding. because there has to be some frame, there has to be a professional staff behind this, there has to be a very professional cooperation with the correctional and the progressional service. So, and you also have a responsibility to take care of the volunteers. So there is a big responsibility for the NGOs to take a part of this. So that it's very important to, yeah.
We have many interesting answers. Actually, the most typical answer now is society. So whose responsibility is it? It's society. Audience says it's government, and it's government. It's NGOs, it's the individual, authorities, societies, prison system, prisoners themselves, family, healthy support system, municipality, state, society, own responsibility. Well, then let's continue. Kim, how would you comment these answers?
Yeah, it's interesting. You can always blame the government, and you can blame many others here, but the interesting part here, the comment, where is it? The prisoners themselves. It's very interesting, because it's easy to blame the society if something goes wrong, but the real motivation is in the prisoner's head to change. But if you don't have any kind of support, when you are motivated, he's there, he's sober, he's ready for action. And if that person is ready for his own rehabilitation, then there must be some professional around, so we can actually continue to be motivated. And our job is to keep them motivated. So it's very, very interesting. And another thing is important in the prison is that to cover the three basic needs in the prison system, if you don't have decent food in the prison, and you have to fight for the food, and you have to deal with the food, then that person will not focus on his own rehabilitation, because he's so busy finding food that is decent. If the healthcare system is bad, shitty, and he has some problems with his body, and he will never, or she will never, focus on his own rehabilitation, because he has health issues. And then the last one is safety. If that person doesn't feel safe in the prison, he is afraid of the others in the dormitory, where he have to share a big room with 15 others, and the subculture is actually running the dormitory. He will never ever focus on his own rehabilitation. So we have to focus already there, to focus on the basic needs and also the prisoners themselves. But we have to be there when we find this motivated person.
Dana, jums tas pats jautājums, kam būtu jāuzņemas galvenā atbildība resocializācijas procesā? Kā jūs prāt?
Man nav atbildes, bet, protams, es varu pateikt, ka man liekas, ka, protams, valstī būtu jāuzņemas liela atbildība šajā ziņā, bet es varu pateikt, ka mūsu rehabilitācijas centrs, kad vērās vaļā 11 gadus atpakaļ, tad aizvērās pēdējais rehabilitācijas centrs valsts, un mēs nesaņemam atbalstu nekādu no valsts. Man šķiet, ka tas nav pareizi. Bet, protams, nevar tikai uz valsti, jā, visu. Es tā kā piekristu gandrīz visam, ko tur mēģina pateikt cilvēki. Ir paša atbildība, ir ģimenes atbildība, ir sabiedrības atbildība, līdzcilvēku atbildība. Bet es tomēr gribu teikt, ka tā resocializācija un atgriešanās dzīvē tomēr ir ļoti lielā mērā tā cilvēka atbildība un viņa motivācija. Tāpēc mēs centrā, piemēram, ņemam tikai, saucam motivētus klientus. Tas nozīmē, ka viņš saprot, kāda viņam ir problēma, un viņš tā kā nāk un lūdz palīdzību. Ja viņu kāds atved ar varu un saka, ka viņam tur jāpaliek vai ģimenē vieglāk, protams, tiekot no viņa vaļā, tur arī nekas nesanāks. Tā kā, bet palīdzēt viņam saprast viņa problēmu un tā tālāk, tas ir ļoti sarežģīti, tas nav tik vienkārši, un ar katru cilvēku ir pilnīgi savādāk.
Dmitri, the same question goes to you, but also a comment from your side. Where do you feel that which is the weakest part? Which is weakest part in this system?
Jā, paldies. Es uzskatu, ka valdība diezgan iekļaujas, jo mūsu valdība iekļaujās tajā resocializācijas procesā tieši piepildot ieslodzījuma laiku ar resocializācijas saturu. Mums cietumos ļoti daudz notiek, ļoti daudz izdarīts, un mēs esam ļoti daudz gatavi sniegt. Mēs, katram tiek sagatavots individuālais resocializācijas plāns, un atkarībā pēc viņa vajadzībām, ja ir nepieciešama pēc izglītības, mēs nodrošinam pamat izglītību, vidu izglītību, pat augstāko izglītību, darba prasmes, mēs iedodam profesiju, nepieciešams strādāt, pelnīt naudu, mēs nododam darba vietas, tas viss notiek cietumos, un tā ir valdības, teiksim, atbildības daļa, ko viņi uzņēmās un viņi īsteno. Galvenokārt, es domāju, ka būtu, protams, pašiem, šoreiz es vēl pateikšu bijušiem ieslodzītiem, bet es nokomentēšu. Katram jāuzņemās atbildība par savu dzīvi, tāpat kā visiem mums, kas nav nokļuvuši cietumā, mēs uzņemamies atbildību par savu dzīvi. Bet sabiedrībai jāuzņemās nevis atbildība, bet jābūt iekļaujošai, jābūt spējīgai uzņemt un ļaut iekļauties. Jo tu vari būt nenormāli motivēts iekļauties sabiedrībā, bet ja tevi grupa nepieņem, tad tu vienalga, cik tu labs esi, tu nevarēsi iekļauties, ja tevi nav gatavi pieņemt. Bet man ļoti nepatīk vārds tieši, mēs pieņemsim ieslodzījumu vietās, ieslodzījumu vietu pārvaldē, mēs nesaucam, jau cenšamies nesaukt viņus par ieslodzītiem, bet par klientiem, mūsu sistēmas klientiem. Un šeit jautājums spēlēs daudz savādāk, ja mēs viņu pārsauksim, ka nevis former prisoners, bet kam būtu jāuzņemās atbildība par sabiedrības locekļiem, kuri ir bijuši cietumā. Un viņš skan pilnīgi savādāk. Jo vārds ieslodzītais un formulējums ieslodzītais, bijušais ieslodzītais, tas arī ir tāds tā kā zīmoks virsū, ko arī mūsu klienti saprotās un apzinās un nesam. Tas varbūt arī traucē iekļauties sabiedrībā. Un arī sabiedrība viņus tā arī uztver. Bet tie ir sabiedrības locekļi, kur viņam sanāca, kā Stians teica, tā gadījās, viņi bija nokļuvuši cietumā, bet viņi ir sabiedrības locekļi, nevis bijuši ieslodzīti, ka tā būtu atsevišķa rasa vai atsevišķa kaut kāds etnis. Liekot tādu zīmogus virsū, mēs arī neļaujam viņiem iekļauties sabiedrībā.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very interesting comment, and also the point about stigmatization and both self-stigmatization and stigmatization from others, because we know that individuals' identity actually is shaped by how others see them in larger extent than how we see ourselves. And unfortunately, time is really running. I have promised the audience opportunity to ask you questions. Are there any questions in audience you can ask either in English or in Latvian? If you don't have, I always have questions, but there is an opportunity to ask a question.
Agnes, can we prolong?
I have to ask organizers. Yes, there is a question. No. Yes, please. Is there a microphone, please?
Es uzjautāšu latviski, cik efektīva ir brīvprātīgo līdzgaitnieku tā programma. Es esmu, ka probācijas dienests viņu īsteno. Tā kā, kad cilvēki var pieteikties par brīvprātīgajiem un tad kaut kā palīdzēt to resocializācijas procesu, cik es saprotu.
Yes, it's about how efficient is involvement of volunteers in probation system. Yeah.
Yeah. In numbers, it's quite difficult to explain the numbers because we haven't done the reports, and it's also a lot of things inflecting this: the prison system, the society, the municipality, and there's a lot of cooperation to get a success. And the most important thing is the guy himself or the girl himself, herself. So it's but we can see big changes, that's for true, because most of our participants are re-offenders going out and in of prison. And we see some of them, maybe they usually go out of prison and they come back in half a year or something. But we see they got more seldom and seldom in prison, and maybe one or two, and maybe at the first time they succeed. So it's hard to tell the numbers, but we can see the big changes from his former life after taking part in this program. So I think it's not just the work of the NGO that's important for me to tell, because in Oslo now we also have opened a re-entry center where we have a social welfare office in the building, we have a public school in the building, we have the correctional service in the building, we have working trainings arenas in the building, we have 2,000 square meters now with the offering under one roof. So it's very, and then make it more easy for them to, because it's not just what we're doing in the NGOs, it's a lot of things here which must cooperate to get a good results. But yeah, I can tell for our part, we have good numbers, but I'm not sure if I want to use the percents.
But I have also a question to you. Do you have any numbers of how many people do you manage to help during the year? And do you manage to help everyone who needs help?
Sadly, we can't help anybody, but I hope we will come there. But in Oslo now, I think at this time we are following up maybe 400 persons at each time at this time, and in all the units in Norway, I think about 600 and 700, now 800 at this point actually, and we have about in Oslo maybe 300 volunteers and 16 staff people. Yeah. And
if you wouldn't do it, who would do it then?
Maybe nobody. There is a lot of volunteers, but we are working very differently in Norway. So that's maybe the main reason that the Red Cross in Norway take a part of this, because there was a humanitarian need, and then we have a responsibility as a Red Cross organization, not just in Norway, elsewhere as well.
But do I understand it right that actually both in Norway and in Latvia, inside prison, actually there is much support what is needed, there are possibilities to work and study, but the problem is actually when they get released, that there is some kind of missing link between life in prison and life after prison. Do I understand it right? Can you comment this?
I really believe that if you want to take a PhD in the prison system in Norway, you can do it. But it's up to you. And it's up to each one of the prisoners or the clients to do that, to start with education. But if you have a long sentence, you can actually take a PhD to be more secured when you are released. So everything is there.
In prison, but when you get released.
Yeah, but then we have to send the person to the next one, because the prison sentence stops tomorrow. And then we have no responsibility longer than that. And then someone have to take over. And that's you guys, or the probation service.
Are there more questions? But then it means that it is to a large extent dependent on volunteers.
It's more than Red Cross in Norway. I said we have 30 different NGOs working in the prison service in Norway. Red Cross is one out of 30, maybe more. All the NGOs are working in different ways. Stian is very lucky because he have volunteers. The others don't have that. So it's different kind of volunteers or NGOs that take part in this together.
Dimitris, can you comment situation in Latvia with volunteers? Do you have many volunteers in prisons?
Jā, bet par brīvprātīgiem noteikti vairāk izstāstītu valsts probācijas dienests. Es varu nokomentēt jautājumu. Es domāju, ka līdzgaitniecība, ko attīsta valsts probācijas dienests, kā minimums 2 līmeņos ļoti lielu ietekmi rada. Pirmais, tas ir individuālais līmenis katram konkrētam klientam, palīdzot atgriezties normālā dzīvē, un augstākā līmenī tas ir parādot ieslodzījumā esošiem, ka sabiedrība ir gatava viņus uzņemt, jo ir līdzgaitniecības kustība, kur var meklēt palīdzību, lai atgrieztos normālā dzīvē. Mēs arī attīstam brīvprātīgo kustību. Tas viennozīmīgi ir apsveicami, un mēs cenšamies izmantot pēc iespējas vairāk, ko mēs varam dot, lai cilvēki izejot no cietuma, paliktu brīvībā un sabiedrībā.
Thank you so much for a very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, our time is up, and 1 hour is not enough to discuss these issues. We had our good speakers, Dmitrijs Kalins, Dana Anskaite, Kim Ekhaugen, Stian Estenstad. Thank you so very much.